Always trust.
We ask the questions.
What is needed in the world?
Munther Isaac je palestinski kršćanski pastor i teolog. Trenutno je pastor Evangeličke, Luteranske, Božićne crkve u Betlehemu i Luteranske crkve u Beit Sahouru. On je također akademski dekan Biblijskog koledža Betlehem te direktor utjecajnih konferencija Christ at the Checkpoint. Munther Isaac godinama se bavi pitanjima vezanim uz palestinsku teologiju. Govori lokalno i međunarodno te objavio brojne članke o pitanjima vezanim uz teologiju zemlje, palestinske kršćane i palestinsku teologiju, holističku misiju i pomirenje. Mr. Isaac, welcome to Al Jazeera.
Thank you for having me.
Let's start with perhaps the incident that some people may know you for. This is something that happened on Christmas, end of 2023, when you canceled Christmas festivities in Bethlehem. So could you please tell our viewers a little bit more about that incident?
Yes, so it was a natural decision because it's important to emphasize that how can we celebrate Christmas when there is a genocide happening in our land? No one was in a mood to celebrate. We are in a state of mourning. We are broken. Most of our attention and focus is in Gaza right now. We're praying for a ceasefire. But usually during December, Christmas time, Bethlehem and all over Palestine, there are celebrations and festivals. And of course, it's inappropriate to go on with life as usual. The canceling of these festivals also sent a message to the world that while, especially in the Western world, they celebrate Christmas in very festive ways, in the land where Christmas started, we are in a state of mourning. And we are in a state of war, actually. It's important to emphasize that even in Gaza, there are Christians, friends and family members. So it doesn't make any sense at all. We're not in a mood to go to a party or to march in the streets in celebrations while our siblings in Gaza are facing extinction and a genocide.
And tell me, Mr. Isaac, what has the reaction, perhaps from the global Christians, been to the plight that you have been advocating and to, for example, this canceling of Christmas in all over Palestine as well? Is somebody listening?
I think the world is listening, and I think this war and what's happening right now is evident to everyone to see. It's hard to conceal it. It's hard not to see it. And many media outlets from all over the world came to Bethlehem, came to our church to talk to us. And we shared about what's happening. But the sad truth is that it's not that people don't know, it's whether they care. And it's whether they are doing enough to stop this genocide. There is definitely a lot of empathy and sympathy around the world, but it has not reached to the level of impacting decision makers. So after all our work during Christmas and after all the appeals, the prayers, the messages, it's been now more than 110 days and the war is still going on. It's really frustrating and deflating, to be honest.
From what I understand, around that time, around New Year's, you visited the United States, you met with some congressmen. What has the reaction there been, to your appeals, and what kind of conversations did you have? What kind of feedback did you get from them?
This was in the end of December. Colleagues of mine were just in the United States also to advocate for a ceasefire. So what we think is that maybe if we go as church representatives, maybe we will have an hearing. And actually, American politicians, whether congressmen and women or the staff in the White House or the State Department, they always welcome us. They listen, but they lack the political desire and will to make a change. In some cases, we realized that there is lack of awareness. In other cases, actually, they know the details of this war. They understand the severity of it, but it's all politics. And in the United States, allegiance to Israel is part of the American DNA, it seems. And even when Israel commits obvious war crimes, it continues, and this support continues.
Mr. Munther, before we go back to Palestine, let's stay in the U.S. because you just mentioned it. In the United States, we also have a similar name to the church you belong to, which are American evangelicals. So could you, from let's say this religious point of view, first of all explain the difference, if there is one, between these two, and then tell us a bit about their incremental importance to this conflict and to the American influence and stance towards Israel and Palestine?
Yeah, so I belong to the Evangelical Lutheran Church in Jordan and the Holy Land, and we have strong presence in Palestine. Historically, we came from, we were started by European missionaries, but right now we are fully indigenous and a Palestinian church. And so even though we carry the same evangelical tradition, oftentimes we discover that we are different with our American or European evangelicals in different ways and in separate ways. In particular, there is a big difference between American evangelicals who belong to, if you wish, free churches when it comes to their view of the theological significance of the state of Israel, known as Christian Zionism, support for the Jewish people, and then many times it's associated with scenarios of the end times, what God will do in the end of the world, and before that Israel must be created, Jews must come to Palestine, there will be a battle and a war. So of course we don't believe that, and here in Palestine, and we see that in that theology there is a tendency to support war. There is unconditional support to Israel. They don't want to understand the facts on the ground. And more importantly to us, there is complete dismissal of our presence. Mm-hmm. And so this ideology translates into the dismissal of the plights of Middle Eastern Christians, including Palestinian Christians, and their vision of what happens and should happen to Israel, and their affinity and their loyalty to Israel trumps even their support to Middle Eastern Christians, including evangelical Palestinians. It's a community that we try to reach out to, and we've been trying to reach out to for years. It has not been easy because oftentimes their theology is a mixture of not just theology, but attitudes of prejudice and superiority. Thinking that they know the right understanding of history, the right understanding of Bible. Maybe they feel sorry for us for not getting it. And they try to create a narrative that we are as if trapped in between a religious war between Jews and Muslims, which is not true. So they try even to shift the narrative to fit their own paradigm and their own theology. And this group, sadly, with its influence and with its money, has managed to put our existence in the Middle East and in Palestine as Middle Eastern Christians into danger, because Israel's policy is pushing Christians out of Palestine. And we don't have to go far. Just look at this war. It might put an end to the Christian presence in Gaza. Yet there are Christians, evangelical Christians, who support this war because of their loyalty to Israel.
We'll come back to Christian Zionism and some of the things you mentioned, but while we're here now, you just mentioned the Palestinian Christian community, both in the occupied West Bank and in occupied Gaza Strip. In the past few months of the war, there's been a big attack on one of the churches, on one of the oldest churches still existing today. Do you think, I honestly felt as a journalist that at the time of that attack on the church in Gaza, that many Europeans also, it's as if people are not aware that there are Christians living in Palestine, that there Christian Arabs as well. But regarding the attack on Gaza, how is the Christian community there doing now? I know that the losses were great for a very small community. So I was wondering if you're in contact with them.
Yes. So when we talk about Palestinian Christians, we're talking about the oldest Christian community in the world. It should be a surprise if we did not exist. Christianity started here. And the fact that people are still surprised that we exist speaks to the level of ignorance in the West regarding the history here, and even regarding their own faith, given that Bethlehem, where I speak from, is the birthplace of Jesus. I mean, how can you think of Bethlehem without Christians? But our existence now is in danger because of this long-lasting war. It's been 75 years of injustice and oppression against the Palestinians. Many Palestinians were exiled, were ethnically cleansed in 1948 when Israel was created. And before this war, there was a small Christian community in Gaza of around 1,000 people. This number continued to decline over the years because of the siege. So those who managed to escape the siege never returned. And we saw this number of Christians in Gaza decline over the last 16, 17 years. And when the war broke, it was around 1,000. Most of them right now are taking refuge either in the Orthodox Church or in the Catholic Church. They thought that maybe churches will be safe places. But as has been evident to everyone to see in this war, there is no safe place in Gaza, and it seems everybody is a target. And sadly and tragically for that community, when the Orthodox Church was bombed, 18 people died, including 9 children. A few weeks later, 2 women were shot within the campus of the Catholic Church. And a handful of Palestinian Christians actually died in this war, or been killed because of lack of medical attention. If you get sick in Gaza right now with no hospitals, no healthcare, no medicine, you might end up dying, sadly. And so we have relatives of friends who simply died because there was no doctor to take care of them while in the church. We keep in touch with them despite the difficulty because communication is very hard right now in Gaza. It's hard to charge your mobile to begin with, and not every company has lines. And few hours of the day, we're able to contact them, send them text messages of encouragement. Churches are taking care of them. And by the way, there are Muslim families who sought refuge with them in the churches, so it's not just the Christians. But the majority of Christians, as I said, decided not to go south to the Rafah area and decided to stay in the church. They thought and they decided, if we're going to die, we'll die in the church. And we don't want to go to the unknown in the south and end up refugees somewhere else around the world, not knowing what our fate will be. So right now, they're stuck in the middle of Gaza, in the middle of the city center with very little food available. They're using whatever food they have economically. It's not ideal, to be honest. And they speak of trauma, of fear. And the sad thing is that in the midst of this difficult reality, in the back of their mind, they know that after the war ends, they have no homes, because during the ceasefire, they discovered that the majority of the homes that they lived in were either partially or fully destroyed. So they're facing the unknown prospect of what happens after this war ends.
Mr. Isaac, the Palestinian Christians are not just in Gaza. When we're speaking about the West Bank, it's both the Christians, Muslims, anybody who is Palestinian that is faced with rising violence, arrests, even murders in all over occupied West Bank, especially in the last few months, but also as part of a trend for the past years and years. What is the situation in the West Bank, both to tell us right now, in terms of, in the past few months, ever since the war started, but also in general, there is reports of, specifically when speaking about Christians leaving, Palestinian Christians leaving Palestine. So if you could touch upon these points a little bit.
So let's make one thing clear. Palestinian Christians are not a special category among the Palestinians. We don't receive any special treatment from Israel because we are Christians. Everything Palestinians suffer from as a result of the occupation and apartheid policies of Israel touches us as Palestinian Christians, including land confiscation, denial of our rights to build homes in the majority of the West Bank, because Israel controls the land, they control the housing permits to build in the majority of the West Bank, they control the roads, the checkpoints do not distinguish or differentiate between Christians and Muslims. We live under occupation. We live under a system that has been described by many as a system of apartheid, by many human rights and legal organizations. There is so much discrimination and oppression that we face as a result of Israel's policies in the West Bank, especially the expansion of settlements. And we've seen the rise of the settler activity, especially in the last year, and even more after October 7th. Settler violence is on the rise, and daily incursions are on the rise. Since October 7th, Israel has arrested more than 6,000 Palestinians. Just think of that. And the incursions are becoming daily routines. They claim they're searching for wanted people or for weapons. But of course, when someone is arrested, they're arrested without a charge. They're most of the time administrative detention, which is part of the military occupation policies. Overall, life in the West Bank is very difficult. I live just 10 minutes away from Jerusalem, here in Bethlehem, but the majority of Bethlehemites are not allowed to go to Bethlehem, to Jerusalem, I mean. We need a special permit from the Israeli military, and after October 7th, these permits have become very rare. So many people lost their jobs after October 7th, those who used to work in Jerusalem. And because of the tourism, which is a main source of income for the Palestinian Christian community in Bethlehem, we don't have tourism since October 7th. Many people also lost their jobs. So there is an added challenge, if you wish, on those of us in Bethlehem because of our reliance on tourism. And maybe just to add one thing, the Christian community, the Palestinian Christian community in East Jerusalem, have also witnessed the rise of incitement and attacks on Christian sites, on churches, and on clergy by fundamentalist radical groups, all working under the cover of the Israeli government, and they go unaccountable and unpunished. And we've seen an increased and alarming rise in these attacks on Christians in the holy in East Jerusalem, to the extent that the heads of churches in Jerusalem the last 2 years made several joint statements that warned of a systematic plan that targets Christians and wants to drive Christians outside of East Jerusalem. This is a very serious and alarming development in the last 2 or 3 years.
Just for those of our viewers who may not have seen some of these incidents of the attacks on Christians in, for example, Jerusalem, what kind of rise in violence are we talking about? There have been the spitting on Christians, both from around the world or Palestinians. So it's the Christians are the target, as I can understand. What else did your community witness?
So the spitting incidents, graffitis outside of churches, on the walls of churches. There has been some attempts to arson churches and burn churches. Also, and to me, this is the most serious one, attempts to, with suspicious deals, to buy Christian property, and all of a sudden you discovered this church property was sold to a settler group, and then the church leaders denied that it was sold. And we discovered that there is now a dispute between the state and the church over property. This is now at the center stage is the Armenian quarter in East Jerusalem. There's a strong dispute between the church and the state of Israel, and it's going to court over a piece of land that some settler groups said, you know, we have it now and we will build a hotel on it and so on. So the control of property and churches historically own a lot of property, not just in East Jerusalem, but all over historical Palestine. And this is always the dispute between churches and the state of Israel.
Mr. Isaac, you're a theologian, and you've a good amount of your research has been on the Holy Land. I'm wondering, you know, maybe to theoreticize a little bit now, but ever since the Crusades, that area, that part of the world has been under, you know, under the circumstances of different kinds of wars, incursions, and conflicts, primarily, at least as they seem, religious, due to the religious character of it. Are we talking about, as many people in the West will sometimes say, are we talking about a religious conflict? Are we talking about ethnic conflict? You mentioned recently, when we spoke about the American evangelicals, you mentioned Christian Zionism. So is this also part of the whole story here, which is the combination of ethno-religious? What is how would you analyze the situation there, and what are the main causes of the conflict?
To me and to many, I mean, the conflict started when Zionist European settlers came to Palestine in 1948 and created a state. Israel is a settler colonial entity. We cannot bypass that fact that we're dealing with settler colonialism here. This is not a religious conflict. Portraying it as a religious conflict gives the impression that there are two communities in the same land who are fighting over territory or other issues. But the fact is, you know, the European Jewish Zionist settlers came to Palestine, created a state on land that belonged to Palestinians. And when I say on land that belonged to Palestinians, I mean land that we took care of, we inherited, we farmed for generations. One of the things that very people speak about with this war in Gaza is that the state of Israel was built on the ruins of the towns and villages of the very same people of Gaza. So this is the problem. This is the essence of the problem. Now, how did the Western world justify this colonial project that is Israel? They used theology and religion. They said Jews are returning to their land because the Bible says they lived here. And we need to pause here and think for a moment of that logic. They're trying to impose a certain theological belief on a whole group of people and to convince us and the world that because the Bible said Jews lived here many years ago, or in some cases because the Bible, as they believe, promised any Jewish person that the land belongs to them, that Palestinians must accept that premise, the world must accept that premise and support Jewish settlement in the land. So theology was used, and this is the dilemma for us Palestinian Christians, because it's our own Bible, our own religious text has been weaponized against us to justify the creation of Israel, and we see it continue to be used even to justify the expansion of settlements within the West Bank right now today. And whenever there is a dispute or violence, we see people coming back to the Bible and say, look, God is on the side of Israel in the Bible, God is on the side of Israel today. So they confuse Israel of the Bible with the Israel of today. And in some instances, they even confuse the enemies of Israel in the Bible with the enemies of Israel today, which could have horrific consequences. I mean, even Netanyahu compared Palestinians to the Amalekites. The biblical story actually calls for the total destruction of the Amalekites. To me, as people of faith, we have a mandate to challenge this line of thinking. People of faith should work and do their best to bring people together, not to divide. If we believe in the God of justice and peace, the God of mercy, the God of love, and this is what I cannot understand as a Christian. I look at Jesus, his call for peace, for love, loving the neighbor as yourself. I never see Jesus fighting or carrying weapons or encouraging war. And then to see Christians supporting genocide, supporting the creation of Israel when it meant the displacement of 800,000 Palestinian Christians, even cheering it with lack of empathy to the Palestinians. I don't see anything that is Christ-like in this attitude and this theology. So I feel it's a mandate for me as a Christian, but I think it's a mandate for all people of faith who believe that religions should be used to, are meant to bring us together rather than to promote war, sectarianism, division. We have an added responsibility to say, to speak, and to act. And this is why many of us here in Palestine feel the need to be more vocal about what's happening, because our Bible has been weaponized against us.
Mr. Isaac, just for the end, a short question. With all of the challenges right now in front of all Palestinians of all religions, how important is the friendship, let's say, or communication between Palestinian Muslims and Christians?
There is definitely unity, and sometimes when people ask us this question, I get the impression that they assume that they're talking about two different groups in the same land. You have to remember that Palestinian Christians are Palestinians. And we've been living in this land with Muslims for 1400 years. We're Arabs, we speak the same language, we have the same culture, and the desire for self-determination and independence and freedom is common to all of us. We don't even distinguish between Christians and Muslims, because even look at this war, all of us are victims of this war. When we Palestinians say we're calling for self-determination, it's for all Palestinians, Muslims and Christians alike. And yes, Palestinian Christians are small in numbers in the occupied territories, but let's remember that worldwide there are many, many Palestinian Christians. Most of them sadly are denied the right to return. In an ideal world, those Christians could come in and out, even maybe resettle and be part of the building of a future for all Palestinians.
Mr. Isaac, thank you very much for all the time and for this interview. All the best.
You're welcome. Thank you again for having me.